everybody needs to understand at least one big cloud vendor, AWS, Azure, Google, Alibaba. So you need to understand how to consume services. Let's put it that way.
This is DevOps Paradox, episode number 140. What every DevOps should learn in 2022. Welcome to DevOps Paradox. This is a podcast about random stuff in which we, Darin and Viktor, pretend we know what we're talking about. Most of the time, we mask our ignorance by putting the word DevOps everywhere we can and mix it with random buzzwords like Kubernetes, serverless, CI/CD, team productivity, islands of happiness, and other fancy expressions that make us sound like we know what we're doing. Occasionally, we invite guests who do know something, but we do not do that often since they might make us look incompetent. The truth is out there, and there is no way we are going to find it. P.S. It's Darin reading this text and feeling embarrassed that Viktor made me do it. Here are your hosts, Darin Pope and Viktor Farsic. Happy New Year to everyone. Welcome to 2022. Is it going to be any different than 2021?
We'll be traveling, man. It has to happen. I think that we are reaching the point where we as a society or the planet will kind of have to either get rid of Corona or to learn to live with it. Kind of, my bets are going into the latter kind of. Simply, it will be here with us.
But that's not what we're going to talk about today. We have a question from Konstantin. What should every DevOps person learn in 2022? How to write your resume? Is that number one?
Oh, resume. I don't have one, but depends. I guess that the answer to the question falls into two categories. There is one, what you should learn because you have to, job-wise. And for all I know, you might have to learn mainframe, right? Because that's what your job requires you to learn and to use, and so on and so forth. So I think that we should skip that category because that can be literally anything. And then there is a second category. What should you learn because of your resume? Because you want to have skills and knowledge that give you options in the job market. And that's less broad potentially than what job requires you to learn. And that's cloud. Learn cloud. That's it. Another short episode. But cloud is a must, kind of. Everybody, not even only DevOps, but we're talking now about DevOps, something. Everybody needs to understand at least one big cloud vendor. AWS, Azure, Google, Alibaba. So you need to understand how to consume services. Let's put it that way. And those services are all living in cloud. And that means also Kubernetes. Kubernetes is a must. Serverless is coming. You need to learn those things. And before any of those, really, before any of those, you need to learn how to write code. I think that there is still that notion that DevOps is the same thing as operations. It's not. You need to write code, period. Anybody attempting to be a professional in the software industry not writing code is terribly mistaken and terribly wrong path. Now, that code can be shell script, for all I care. Write bash. Doesn't even have to be Go or Python or something. But you need to learn how to write code. And once you do, after that, services. And that's cloud and Kubernetes.
So if you're writing code, I'll take it one step further. Even before you could consume the services, you have to acquire the services. And the way that you should acquire the services is via code. Terraform, Pulumi, fill in the blank, doesn't matter.
It's all code. But, if it's not only that, because if you're just writing code because certain service is forcing you to write code, then I'm not sure whether you still should be called DevOps, right? Because that's not really any different from ops 20 years ago, right? Every single person in operations had to use at least one tool, one service. Whether that's in cloud or on-prem, whether that's VMware or AWS, doesn't matter. If you want to put dev into ops, you need to be able to write your own code. I'm not actually sure how to say not HCL, right? Because at the end of the day, you're creating services as well. Maybe that would be a very short explanation of what you're doing, right? You're creating services for others to consume, even if that's a shell script.
But that really goes beyond DevOps, though. That's a complete mind shift where it goes beyond. Because it's not
the ops.
It's dev in the ops, but devs are creating services in theory, right?
Yeah, but that's dev and ops. So kind of like, yes, that's you have developers and you have operators. Where's the DevOps in that story?
No, there isn't any. Okay. So that's the argument, is if you're going to be a quote-unquote DevOps, which I believe we both still believe doesn't actually exist. That's the name of this podcast. There are very few places where I think a true DevOps person could exist.
Correct.
It's typically not going to happen in a large, it's not going to happen in an enterprise. It's probably not going to happen in a large company. Maybe in small to medium business to where there's only 5 people to do all the things. But then it's just the nature of the business at that point.
That's where we now do segue into what is large and what is enterprise. Is Netflix large? Is it enterprise? It is, right?
It is, but it grew from those beginnings. So the processes they had, at least as we can see from the outside, have always existed. If Netflix would have started in the 1950s, it would not be much different than any of the large insurance or banks that exist today. Legacy issues. It's the legacy issues that I believe are causing the DevOps issues, because you could be an enterprise today that is doing quote-unquote DevOps, if it's a thing, but you're not carrying around legacy.
True. I just kind of feel that we need to redefine, in a way, what we mean when we say enterprise.
It's the beginning of the year, and now's a good time to go ahead and define things.
When majority of people say enterprise, they really mean, I guess, old or exist for a very long time, not able to adapt to the present tense, something like that.
To me, I use enterprise typically as a derogatory term.
Exactly. Because kind of, I guess that there are cases where an enterprise can jump from being a negative thing into a positive thing. Like, hey, I don't know, like this bank, they improved, they changed drastically. I'm trying to avoid to name them. And now it's not enterprise anymore. Enterprise in terms of old, not up to date, whatever, right?
Yeah. Slow.
So, and I do believe that even though it does not necessarily happen often, but enterprises with negative connotations can actually transform. I kind of almost felt bad that you said 50s, because if you changed to 70s, I think, you could probably qualify Microsoft in that group. You just missed it for 20 years, or I don't know when Microsoft started though, but I guess 70s.
So don't use the word enterprise anymore.
It's not bad not to use it. It's just kind of like clarifying that what we really mean by that, we don't mean only big.
Not just 50,000 plus person companies. We mean companies that are slow, dated, legacy driven, top down management style, still wearing the pressed white shirts with ties. That's how I'm envisioning enterprise.
Yes. Maybe a shorter description would be all that, with companies that are saying now that software is their core business, but it's not. Because everybody's saying that now, right? You cannot find a company that doesn't say it. Software is important, it's our core business. But many do not act that way. Okay, so I did not think this through, so stop me at any moment. I think that maybe the major difference would be companies where significant percentage of IT or software development is not done in-house. I think that we can actually make that relation. When I think about companies that I think are doing things right, they're almost always majority in-house. Netflix, Apple, fintech companies, even huge banks that manage to turn things around in-house, always in-house.
That control is important.
It's not only control, but it's also acknowledgement that this is important, because you give away work of not important things, like cleaning services. Hardly any company employs people who do cleaning services, right? Because that's not considered important for the business. Not that there is anything wrong with it. But software, if it's important, it goes in-house. If it's not important, it stays out, like any other part of the business. And I think that almost everybody agrees with. If we would remove software for the equation, I think that we would find that relation in any business. It's important, it's in-house. It's not important, it's out. If you take Apple, for example, and I'm not talking about software, right? What is really important for Apple? Making iPhones? No. Designing iPhones? Yes. That's their core business. Their core business is design of the devices that they sell you. Software as well. And both of those things are in-house. Making chips? No, not important. Designing them? Yes.
I don't know. If the pandemic goes on much longer, making the chips may become also very important. Having your own foundry may be a big deal at some point.
Yes, but I think that the problem is lacking materials, right? So you need to have your own mind as well.
So each layer starts calling out each other thing that you need. So you said cloud from a learning perspective. You need to know at least one cloud. You're more than likely going to need to know Kubernetes.
Yes.
Start learning serverless. Again, all of these things should be able to be, I'm going to use the word automated in a very broad sense, in some way, shape, or form. Are there any new things that you need to know? And obviously, there's stuff that don't even exist today.
Yeah,
that will by the end of the year.
That will appear in 2022 and are not on the horizon yet. But the reason why I said Kubernetes and cloud is because that happens to touch almost everybody, right? Everybody that is working on something relatively modern, right? Excluding what I said before, what you really, really need for your work. And it's good for your knowledge, understanding, it's good for your curriculum, and so on and so forth. Now, beyond that, there are many things, but then we are already entering into what is your specialty. You will have to control CI/CD pipelines, but that's not already the same category because it's not everybody. You will have to, let me think, my brain stopped now. Is there GitOps, for example. GitOps is a thing. It's here to stay. It already reached the critical mass. Will everybody have to know it? No, not necessarily.
Are there any soft skills that people should be learning if they haven't learned it yet?
Oh, I'm not a good person. I never learned soft skills myself.
There's your answer. Or is it?
I'm exaggerating. I'm kidding. It is extremely important, especially now that I think that due to pandemic and everything, and we have new rules, no processes, it is very important that we change how, first of all, soft skills in general, but also change how we communicate, how we do work, much more asynchronous. And so that's why I mentioned in the previous episode, Git is the mother of everything, including the documentation, because one of the reasons why we use completely Git for everything, including documentation, notes, and everything, is precisely because of that need for asynchronous communication, because we are not all in the same place, not even in the same time zone.
So if you're not used to working async, I mean, there's still going to be some people that work in an office.
Of course, but we are, on average, as industry as a whole, not specifically for any single company, we are not going to go back to the same numbers as before. So whether in your company it's going to be 10% remote or 20 or 50 or 90, that's a different question. But I feel that remote work, potentially in different time zones, is here to stay. And it was actually here always. We were talking about big companies. Tell me a big company doesn't have people working in incompatible time zones?
0.
Big one.
Yeah, 0. All of them do.
Exactly. You have people in Asia, in Europe, in US, in Australia. If you don't have in all those continents, you have in at least 2. And that means that we do not spend 8 hours during the same time frame every day. And that means that we cannot anymore have meetings and say, hey, okay, so we're going to have a meeting to decide this, we're going to have a meeting to decide that, to discuss this and that. We are also, of course, going to continue having meetings, but the way how we digest information has to go asynchronous way.
And along with that, you need to, and this is my opinion, you may not agree with this. I believe any meeting that happens online should be recorded.
Yes.
I mean, if it's just me and you getting together to talk while we're eating lunch, that doesn't need to be recorded. But you need to be able to be ready to punch that button if you're just having that off-the-cuff conversation. It's like, oh man, I wish we would have recorded that. You should be ready to record at any point in time.
I would go even a step further and say that I think that every meeting should be recorded and transcribed. We have a technology, so technology is not a problem anymore. And sometimes I'm not in a meeting because I couldn't attend, but I really, really wanted to. And then I'm going to watch the meeting. But sometimes I just want to digest it fast, kind of those half an hour of meeting in 5 minutes. And that's when I need notes. So either somebody's taking notes or transcribe it.
I found that just for the day job, when there's meetings that are larger group meetings or presentation type meetings, I want to be able to go back and watch those things over and over again. So I'll get the video, I'll watch it at 2x speed because most people I can understand at 2x. After learning to listen to you at 2x, I can listen to anybody at 2x. And then sometimes I'll take it and download it and transcribe it just for myself. Yeah. Because I'm trying to find keywords that pop out. Because one of the transcribe tools I use is Otter, and Otter will call out all the repetitive words automatically for me. So if I look at the document and I see, okay, well, GitOps was used 15 times here. Why the heck were we using the word GitOps in the case where we were talking about refilling a soda machine? What caused that conversation to go in that direction?
Exactly. Simply, things need to be searchable and live forever. I had actually not long ago a question internal within a company. Hey, how much our customers care about GitOps? And then kind of like, actually, why am I asking that? Why don't I go and search through the conversations? And for me to search, I need to have transcribed conversation. And every Zoom meeting, I'm not sure actually whether it requires an extra tier payment, but I'm going to ignore that. But every Zoom meeting is transcribed if you choose to do so.
Yeah. There is a service called Searchy. It's search, S-E-A-R-C, if I'm spelling it right, SEARCHIE.io. And it's primarily for content creators or course creators, but their secret sauce is the ability to have the video there, but they also transcribe it, but then they map the transcription back to the video. So if you're scanning through the transcription, it's like, oh, I want to go to this part of the video. You just click on the word and it takes you right to that point of the video. And that's super cool.
Exactly. I think that's, at least in my case, that's the most common use case of me needing transcribed text from a meeting, from a video, whatever. Not only for me to read it, but to find the part that I want to watch.
Correct. And in the case of Otter, which is just audio only, it'll do the same thing because it has the audio. I can click on the word and then it drops me right into the audio and I can listen to the audio. I don't have the video, but at least I've got the audio. But then being able to map that text back to some audio or visual component is really important. And the reason why I think we went down this route is in order to learn, sometimes you're going to have to go back through and listen to something again or watch something again. Or maybe you just weren't there and you're getting notes from somebody's notes, which is sort of like playing the telephone game, where you have people sitting in a circle and you say it, and by the time it gets back around to you, it's not even close to what you said. And if you have the transcription, if you have the audio or video of the meeting, there's no question. It was said. Now, whether or not it's true is a different conversation, right? Because people will say things. Just listen to us. We will just say things. But at least you have better context than taking somebody out of context. And that's the reason why sometimes you have to watch something 2, 3, 4, 5 times. It's like, okay, what are we really saying here? Because sometimes just having a meeting recorded and transcribed will save 2, 3, 4, 10 follow-up meetings. Because you can always go back to the source material. It's like, this is what we said. We agreed that this is what we're going to do. There's no argument at that point. It should just be the default, is record everything.
And be able to find it.
And be able to find it, which is the harder part. It's like doing restores from a backup, right? It's easy to back up. It's easy to record. It's not always easy to get the information back.
Exactly. A good indication of that, I think, could be Slack. Many of us are using Slack, and we go there and we ask kind of, hey, how does this work? What should I do? What was decided? And so on and so forth. Now, a bad answer to those questions is an answer to those questions. A good answer to that question is, here's a link.
Here's the link to the slides. Here's the link to the recording.
Exactly. So there is no strong need for me to repeat that to you. There is no strong need for me to tell you that, to spend time, and so on and so forth. And not everything is documented. Not everything can be answered with a link. But then we try to improve that. Kind of like, okay, so this is how it works. It's not documented. Let me explain it to you, and then go and make a pull request.
We're talking about the things that are in the past, but I'm going to flip it around. And this is sort of weird that we're talking about this from a DevOps learning, but instead of just having meetings, and we've talked about this in the past, instead of just having meetings, especially if it's going to be a presentation type thing, just record the presentation in advance. If you're trying to show somebody how something works, just do a screen recording of it, or whatever the case may be. Let people watch it, and then have a Q&A around that thing. And let people bring the questions. By the way, you need to record that session as well, because you're going to get, it's flipping the education system on its head.
There is nothing necessarily wrong with actually having that meeting. And then it's kind of like a choice, kind of, do you want to watch a soccer game live, or you want to watch a recording? It's your choice. It's just that it cannot be only live. I think that's the point. It's not necessarily that it shouldn't be live. We should see each other's faces, we should talk with each other, and so on and so forth, but that cannot be exclusive.
Don't get me into camera on or camera off, because I am strongly in the camp of camera off. But that's another conversation.
Camera off during the meeting or camera off?
Yes.
Oh, really? I'm the other way around. I feel better when I see the face.
It's just the way that I was trained. I'm more used to listening than I am looking at people's face.
You're a radio professional, man.
I am. I'm used to
not
having...
representative.
No, I'm not. I know I'm the oddball. So that's... I'm thankful for people that allow me to keep the camera off.
But when we record podcasts with guests, I feel that having a video, even though it's not in the end result, people don't see us talking. It helps, right?
Because you can see the nuances. And this goes back to the soft skills. Being able to read somebody's face if the eyebrows go up, if you see a smirk, or you see somebody raising their hand. Those indicators are important. So really, when you think about what should be learned in 2022, some tech, but as remote work continues to be a thing, building stronger soft skills are probably as important, if not more important, than the technical skills.
Learning how to work remote. That's probably the most important thing for 2022. Because to be honest, I'm really disappointed by news from companies saying that, hey, now we're going back to the office 100%, no excuse, starting from this date. To me, that's very disappointing. I'm not saying that all companies should be 100% remote, but being able to accommodate different people's needs is important. And I think that remote is part of that. Like maybe not everybody can move to San Francisco, or maybe not everybody has the same schedule because maybe there's children involved or whatever the reason is, right? And remote enables those things.
Remote gives you the ability to hire the best people, not just the people that live closest to the office.
Exactly. And also allows you not to be other than Google. Because Google can say, hey, I can actually employ anybody I want. And if that person is living in Sri Lanka, I have enough money to actually make that person worthwhile moving to San Francisco.
Most people don't have Google money.
Exactly.
Most companies don't have an advertising arm that can pay for the rest of the company. So what should you be learning? Some tech, but build your skills to be able to work remotely. Even if you have to go back into the office some, there will be something else that happens. And remote work will happen again. And being able to make that transition is key.
Again, even if you're 100% in the office, if you're a bigger company, you're not 100% in the same office. And that's kind of remote.
That's true. If everybody's not in the same office, nobody should be in the same office. If everybody can't be on the virtual call, then nobody needs to be on the virtual call. Or flip it around. If not everybody can be in person, everybody needs to be remote. Different conversations for different days. So Konstantin, I don't know if we answered your question, but if you've listened to this and you're saying, you know what, you guys left out 25 different things, go over to the Slack workspace. The link to the Slack workspace is down in the show notes. Head over to the podcast channel and you'll see a post for this episode, which is episode number 140, and leave your comments there. We hope this episode was helpful to you. If you want to discuss it or ask a question, please reach out to us. Our contact information and a link to the Slack workspace are at devopsparadox.com/contact. If you subscribe through Apple Podcast, be sure to leave us a review there. That helps other people discover this podcast. Go sign up right now at devopsparadox.com to receive an email whenever we drop the latest episode. Thank you for listening to DevOps Paradox.